So I guess we'll just start with kind of where the campaign started. I had been playing some kind of various tabletop games this spring with some friends of mine. Thank you. My voice is so relaxing, thank you. Yeah, we were playing some games. Kind of just like a different game every week, every couple of weeks, that kind of thing. And then I said, hey, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is coming out. I would sure love to try that. You guys in? And everyone pretty much said yes. So I was like, let's just try all the experiments this time, since we're trying a new system. And I've never run the system before. I've never played with a couple of these people before. My brother's never played D&D before. He's one of the players. So like, let's just make everything as confusing and dice rolly as possible. So I was like, hey guys, I've seen this game called Microscope, and to keep in the spirit of trying different things out every week with this group, it's like, let's try to kind of collaborate on making a world using this game called Microscope. And the way it kind of works is each person takes turns being the focus. So you pick a subject that you might be interested in, such as like politics, the gods, Randy's sandwich shop. It really can get as big or as small as you want. And then everyone kind of goes around the table and they insert one thing about that subject. And there's like a couple nuances to it to make it like slightly more gamey, but that's kind of the general gist. You can put we use this this project management software called Trello. Some people might be familiar with it, to kind of simulate the cards that are used in this game. And up here you've got like kind of 3 different levels of things that you define as you're going around the table. You have ages, which are up at the top here for us. Those define kind of like the big moments in history. And we've got quite a few at this point. We've played like 2 or 3 sessions of this now. Below ages you have, it's like events, I think? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's events. So those are like smaller chunks. They can still be long. An event can be like a year if the event is like, you know, the siege of this town and it takes a while. Like, there's no time cap on events. So, the only time cap is it has to be smaller than the age it's in, kind of. And then below that you have scenes, which we avoided. I've read some things about this game where like some groups, they play almost entirely in scenes. Other groups just don't even touch scenes at all. So we fall in the latter group. We tried like one scene somewhere. Yeah, we tried one. There's like 2 versions of scenes. There's a dictated scene where someone just says like, hey, this is what happens during this event. And there's a played scene, which is like kind of freeform role-playing. And like, yeah. So anywhere you see like these dashes, that's like where some scenes are nested underneath. But so we went through this process and built this world kind of together, starting out with like a list of things that we don't want at all and a list of things we would like to see. Like, so we have some interesting things in that list where like someone said, yes, high fantasy, I want this to be a high fantasy game, I love high fantasy. And then we have like no dragons in the ban list and like no magic without cost, so no resurrections. So there's some like contradictions in there that are like interesting to work with. Like, it's definitely possible to do dragons without high fantasy, but like no magic makes it more interesting, or not no magic, but no magic without cost, no free magic makes it a little more interesting to like figure out how things happen, to explain things away, to come up with plot points. And I've kind of settled on, there's a lot of stuff about like synthetic life forms, ancient artifacts, like there's a floating city, stuff being created. Yeah, that No smoke on the water. I forgot why that came up, but I'm pretty sure that was me. It was like, we had the music bot in the channel, and I got to the music bot, and yeah, whatever. That was a very important one. So there's been no smoke on the water. It's been banned from my playlist, and I've had to adapt, and that's really... I'm trying to carry on. So yeah, as I was saying, I kind of like settled on a lot of the magic and a lot of the stuff that happens. It's going to be related to like magical beings that have been created. The campaign we're playing shortly takes place after like this event somewhere over here. Yeah, like the gods were basically sealed away by... I guess we'll just get into this. There was a human, the first human ever created was a synthetic human made by like an elf in partnership with some of the gods on this floating city. And that's kind of where everything starts. We don't know much about the floating city yet. I haven't fleshed it out. The only thing we really like know about the gods is like that they have names and that they represent certain things. What are they? Where is it? Yeah, so the goddess of life is Denala. God of knowledge is Arcanus. The goddess of time is Scala, which is like Norse for clock or timepiece or something. And then there is the god of death, who doesn't have a name, and I think I'm making that like a plot point. Like, he was kind of the big antagonist, the reason why the gods got sealed away in the first place. He was like the most... there was like a rift between the people and the gods. There was kind of like a war. The gods tried to start like destroying all of the major cities of the mortals. And he, like, doing the god of death Lich King thing, he raised a bunch of dead and was like just coming to completely sack a city, and he was like the primary antagonist when everyone got sealed away. So the kind of what I'm rolling with is that something weird happened to him in particular, like he was maybe broken into pieces or like erased from like as an entity. He was more seriously erased or banished from the world. Still kind of working it out. Still working out a lot of this, but I'll be plugging that stuff in as it is convenient. So a lot of the magic and interesting things, the fantasy things that happen in the world, are going to be related to like the creation of these beings that happened a long time ago, like all these synthetic creatures, which includes like clockwork automatons like you'd probably expect, but also things like lizard folk are just like a created species of like basically people who had like mortal wounds or other things being put into like lizard bodies, kind of like dragoons from StarCraft, and like that transforming them into these lizard people. So things like that. There will be like kind of an element of the gods are gone, there's this weird power vacuum, and like beings that gain a lot of worship and a lot of the beings who grind that rep, they get like elevated to godhood. And it seems to be that these beings that were created by people, these synthetic beings, have like a slightly higher chance of being elevated and like gaining sentience and all of these crazy things. Although like regular mortals can also be elevated under certain situations. It's just a little bit harder. They have to like kind of make contracts and cults and all sorts of things. So yeah. Keep tangenting away from what I'm saying, but like the next kind of big thing that'll contribute to the high fantasy feel and the magic is just going to be a lot of ancient artifacts, a lot of ruins, like chunks of this floating city where like technology was at its peak and the gods were like working with mortals to create things. They'll be finding chunks of that all around, and I actually just had some cool ideas on how to loop that in. I'm gonna be trying to kind of keep this into chunks of like, here's stuff that the players can watch and listen to and, you know, kind of get insight onto my thought process and what's going on. And then there'll be like temporary spoilers for like the current arc, and then there'll be like serious like forever spoilers, and we'll probably get into some of those later. Yeah. So yeah, there will be these ancient cities. There will be people kind of getting powers from these elevated gods, forming contracts with them to gain like magical abilities and such, like semi-divine power in exchange for like spreading worship of these elevated creatures and beings. And yeah. So I think that covers the the very basics of what's going on in the campaign. Coming from this, I came up with just kind of a couple of like campaign pitches based on what we created here. So there's like a couple of ideas I had. I'll just go over the one that like they picked to start out with. Like this period right here was the most contentious. Like the gods warring on the mortals, all the way to like kind of the succession crisis and everything. I kind of figured that would be a big. The players kind of told me they were interested in this by putting so much effort into these columns. So I was like, this will probably be a slam dunk. I'll kind of put the biggest chunk of work into a campaign based around this period. And what I did was like Troubles. I called it like Troubles of Men or something. Yeah, Troubles of Men. And it's just the idea of, all right, the gods are gone. We put a lot of work into pushing back their war and getting rid of them. What kind of problems spring up from that? And there's just like situations where, you know, the gods have been helping the mortals in the past, and that obviously isn't happening anymore. But also just like things they've ignored, like, you know, the usual baddies in D&D, like coming in on their territory, taking chunks, kind of threatening the stability of like the power centers that still exist, because like 4 of 5 capital cities on this side of the world got completely just sacked or flooded or in one case turned into an enormous monument for one of the gods. So like humanity, you know, immortal races, they're like spread out a little more. They're not in strong nation states like they were before. So they have to deal with like holding onto their territory, keeping invaders
Fall
out.
is finally here, and so is Old Navy's big fall.
SoundCloud!
Get thousands of styles from just $5.
We'll just mute that for a moment. Music is being provided by Matt Colville's playlist of like generative music from his modular synthesizer, and I think it's super cool. I need to go click on the one that's like an hour long again, because SoundCloud is being a butt, and I don't want to. Maybe I do want to just go subscribe. Maybe I'll go subscribe for. We're just gonna click on the hour playlist. Let's see. Oh, the ad still isn't done. This is worse than YouTube. It's worse than YouTube. Also, thank you for the compliments. I feel embarrassed to, like, call them out, like, out loud. But thank you. This one's 25 minutes. 25 minutes between ads. Sounding okay. I'm okay with that. Okay. So, as I was saying, Troubles of Men, weak nation states. It's more like a city-state setting is kind of what I'm trying to go for. Having some trouble with that, because I don't know how those work. I don't know these... I haven't done a ton of, like, research on, like, Greek city-states and things like that. So it's just kind of a mix of that and, like, feudalism and... Yeah, I'm still kind of trying to get it right. But the one city that they saved, Eden, is kind of currently the strongest and also, as a result, kind of the biggest target kind of has the most problems going on. So that is the city that the players are associated most strongly with, although some of them have connections with other places. So yeah, I did come up with some other ones. There was like one kind of a similar situation, a similar time period, but it's just more less focused on politics and like all of the individual little problems, and like hyper focused on Eden needs food. It's sending people to go basically settle in this valley nearby, this like valley that has been overrun by nature. And that would have been kind of just, it would have been super hex crawl, very low interaction with actual people, a lot of like dungeons and monsters, and yeah, there's like a big bad beast that they would be angling to defeat towards the end. And that's like, it would have been a nice focused campaign, and it probably would have been easier for me to run, and it's not a type of campaign I've been able to like fully run yet, even though I'm super interested. So it's still kind of something I hope to do at some point, but I would say that was kind of the close second. I think it's been a while, but I think they decided that they liked the Troubles of Men one better, which is totally fine. I thought, like I said, thought that would do really well. It's just proven to be pretty challenging. I've been having trouble keeping it engaging, and we'll talk about that in a bit, I guess. A couple of other ones, just like one focused on, hey, the gods are gone, and this idea that the gods like specifically made this world and like hid it away from demons and devils and outsiders, and it would have focused just heavily on these outsider invaders finding the world and like attacking, basically, trying to take over. Probably mostly demons, probably not so much devils, just like demons and creatures that work with them. And let's see, this other one was I'm gonna call it the edgy campaign. It was about like basically like hunting down people who still worship the old gods and like held on to these artifacts that the old gods had and destroying them so that they like just to cut off the influence that old gods had on the world, just to be completely done. And like some signs that the old gods are getting stronger and coming back and maybe coming out of their banishment, and the only way to like prevent it is to destroy like their anchors to the world, which are just like a way of turning the cleric's holy focus into like a plot point for the campaign. And that it would have also dealt with like the now established new gods losing power as the old gods try to like gain a foothold. I was pretty sure that they weren't going to pick either of these, which might be a sign that I should have tried harder to come up with better pitches, but meh. These are the ones that I was interested in, so you know, it's what came out. What they did express was that they wanted elements of basically all three of these other games in the Troubles of Men campaign. I was like, yep, there's going to be some cross-pollination anyway, but since they like specifically said, hey, this is something we want to see, even though we kind of want this more political game, I was like, yeah, totally cool, we'll do that. And from there, I guess I can go into, I'm addicted to random generations and scripts and all sorts of things to kind of generatively add content for me. Oh, it's gonna make me log into Roll20? I was just there. It's okay. And so, let me see. So yeah, I just randomly generated maps to play on. I just went to a bunch of different generators. The first of which was kind of Donjon's generator, which is kind of the most familiar looking. It's got these like hex grid style load whenever. It's hex grid style maps. Yeah. And these are like world maps, but also they look, it's like, this is the donjon generator. Donjon's a very common random generator site for like various things like names and towns and all sorts of things. They added this world map generator at some point, which I thought was super cool. The problem that I have with it is that it pretends to be a world map generator, and it generates very good continents, but like, this is just a super Pangea, basically. It's like, this is one continent that like stretches from here literally all the way around the world, which is fine, I guess, but not exactly what I was looking for. And as a result, it has these like mountain ranges that are just enormous, like thousands of miles long, which I guess is how mountain ranges are. But like, man, yeah, I don't know. It's it doesn't lend itself to D&D campaign settings. I say that, and this is total. Well, is it? No, this isn't the map. Okay, it just, this bay looks similar to the actual map I went with, but yeah. So yeah, but Shadzar, okay. Pathfinder belongs in the Pathfinder category, not D&D category. That's true. My rebuttal is, I am slightly amorally taking advantage of the D&D category's higher viewership to talk about, like, campaign setting and creating the campaign, which is generic to all role-playing games. And, you know, like, this is not system-specific exactly. So that's kind of my justification. Is basically just D&D has higher viewership, and this isn't system specific anyway. So I will just try to get as many people interested in campaign building stuff as I can. And when I talk about system specific stuff, I'll utilize the Pathfinder category. Let's see. So yeah, these are just a couple of maps. Again, like, you'll see every single one of these. The way it kind of generatively makes... Okay, Shadzar. I'm sorry you feel that way. If I took PF2E out of my title as, like, an informational piece, it would make no difference. Like, I'm just talking about campaign building. And the PF2E is just there, like, for an informational piece. But I'm sorry that you feel the need to report me for misinformation. Thank you for letting me know, though. That's friendly of you. I appreciate the notice. So yeah, again, here you'll see more Super Pangeas, basically, just everywhere. Like, this is a little better, but again, enormous landmass. This is... Let me see. This is from a generator called tectonics.js, which is super cool. It, like, simulates plate tectonics. These will all move around, like, spread, come back together, and create, like, high points and low points and snowy points based on, just based on simulated plate tectonics, and it's super cool to me. But a little harder to use for my purposes, a little less directly applicable. I might use it again sometime, but eh. Just, like, a little harder to translate, takes, like, more artistic work, and I had kind of a limited amount of time. The next one, this one's really cool. This one comes from something called Asgar's Fantasy Map Generator. Again, good for, like, building continents and stuff. And it generates a ton of stuff. Like, the landmass, yes, but also, like, borders and rivers and mountains and, like, roads and trade routes and, like, country names and things. It's awesome. I love this generator, and I want to use it again in the future. In this case, we already kind of had some nation names and stuff, and I just didn't end up with the map I wanted, is more more importantly. But yeah, it's great. If you need a, like, campaign setting in a box, this is super helpful. Yeah, like I said, political map, cultural map, which is separate from the political map. Super cool. Shows like how places might have, how cultures might have spread through areas based on, I don't know what it's based on, but I think it's super cool. And like religions, provinces, height map, biomes, which are key for what I was doing. Places of interest. It's really cool, really powerful. Looking forward to using that in the future. And I think that's really mostly it. Oh, the green one. Which green one are you referring to? In the biomes, or let's see. I will try to come back to that. That one. Okay, yeah. So I think this is just kind of aridity, like amount of water, basically. There isn't a key, I guess. But yeah, like the way I interpreted it is just like, this is like deep forests, maybe like kind of a rainforest style thing. Maybe these brown or swamps, or these brown areas could be like mountainous, I think. I'm pretty sure those are mountains. And like the paler, less green you get, the more it's desert, and like maybe the light green is probably grasslands, plains, that kind of thing. It's a little up for interpretation. They probably have a more, they probably have a key somewhere, or like more information. I just don't remember. Oh yeah, oh, I just hover over it. Oh my god, that's amazing. Okay, yeah, so like the kind of beautiful green, the like deep the forest green is like wetlands, and then like taiga as you go up north, tundra, and wow, interesting, glacier. Ooh, this is kind of a cool map. So yeah, brown is tundra, white is glacier, and like, yeah, this paler green is grasslands, and then savanna and tropical seasonal forest. Interesting. Yeah, like I said, really cool. Like, I will be using this in the future. That is at asgard.github.io/fantasy map generator. You can see it up here, and hopefully it's been on the screen long enough that anyone interested in the future can come find it. And yes, oh yeah, right, duh. Okay, so the contenders that I came up with, it was, there was this one, which I thought was super cool, but again, really spread out, huge mountain here. Not a huge variety of biomes, which is not, conducive to, like, a D&D campaign. I keep saying this, how, like, biomes that are super spread out like this aren't helpful. D&D campaign, you don't want to be traveling, like, 100 miles or 200 miles to get out of your current biome. You want to be changing your scenery every like 10 to 20 to 30 miles. And this map was like, if you zoom in, sure, it'll change things up. Do like with some artistic interpretation, you can kind of figure out what you want where and everything. But this map had like some much better, much easier to use spots. And again, this is like, I shrunk this down. This is not a whole world. This is a continent that's like 400 or 500 miles wide. So nothing too big, really. This is actually a really small chunk of the world. And one of the plot points I have to figure out is why so much important happens here, and like what's going on in the rest of the world, where the rest of the world is, that kind of thing. But it's not really relevant right now, so screw it. The place we are playing is kind of this box. Oh, no, it's like from this, no, from like this line all the way down here. It like barely doesn't touch these mountains, and then goes up here, and then cuts back over. And this has a really good mix. Like water comes through, which is an important feature that I wanted. There's like a big lake over here, a bunch of water here. Like cool fjords, which I'm addicted to fjords. Fjords are the love of my life. I love them. They're great. Just big rocky hills going down to like ocean water that's like cut so far deep inland. It's neat. And yeah, the fjords get more like freshwater as they come down here, and that's, yeah, whatever. And there's like some wetlands that kind of border this fjordy area. There's like mountains, there's like a variety of forests. And the mountains are spread out, so you can get mountainous regions in various areas. The forests are spread out. Basically, it's not just one chunk of every biome, like this map, where it's like mountains, hills, forests, and like you don't get much else, you know. And yeah, I think I might use this kind of landmass somewhere in the campaign or just somewhere else. It looks neat. So we'll see. Yeah, and that resulted in. I'm just gonna don't mind me. I'm gonna make sure I don't have to put in any credentials to log in. No, okay. And that resulted in this map that will load up here. Yeah. Once it's done being blurry. Okay. So yeah, this map is the result of that. I made this with a great program called Wonderdraft. Super easy to use, super fast, relatively speaking, to like doing this all in Photoshop. This took like 5 hours instead of like 25. And yeah, looking at it this way, you can see again how things are just really spread out. There's like swamp over here, forest over here, crappy, swampy, infected forest. The kind of like biggest feature is that like woodlands kind of stretch all the way down, but there are good ways to like vary those. I think it's better than having like mountains all the way down. So there's like a chunk of mountains here, kind of blocking progress around, and there's like a bunch of rivers, again, like that great water features that I like in this map. Again, like mountains just off the map here and here in case I want adventures there, and more up here, desert. It's awesome. A nice bay where absolutely a pirate fleet is going to come and like block it off soon. That was like basically decided before the campaign started. There's like a lot of stuff in the microscope session that like decides some of the early plot points for me. So the players started the game kind of spoiled to some of the big events that will happen. I guess that's like, yeah. Yeah, I think we'll kind of like bookend the like campaign building part of it there, and we'll get into like the actual campaign, which is but a little less smooth than all of this stuff. All of this was cool and really inspiring and easy to do, and then actually doing the campaign has been pretty hard. So like, there's kind of a yeah, I started the campaign off with a session, kind of like a group building session, which is, it can be hard, can work out really great. It has worked out really great for me in the past, every single time, where like the group isn't already together, they aren't just meeting in an inn, you know, it's like there's an event that brings them all kind of together. But the first one, this time, part of it was there were 5 players, another part of it was they all went off, they made their own characters, separately from me, and like, well, from each other, more importantly, when I was like encouraging them to kind of get together and like see if they wanted any shared backgrounds or anything. So there was some like last minute shoehorning where like, oh, this person's kind of working with this other person, this person kind of knows like this noble that another player is playing, and like these other 2 are conveniently working together for like 3 days, that kind of thing. But it wasn't cohesive to like a quick jump off point. So I kind of took on the challenge of trying to wrangle the group together in the first session, and I did that by just borrowing one of the plot points in here where like this guy from a city called Lunderkirk, one of the other great cities that had been destroyed. They just came back. They just like built back up and are becoming a power in the region again. And he was like an envoy from that city to come and negotiate some things with the main city. Oh, that's the other thing. The main city is called Eden. The first human is called Adam. These are the kind of things that happen when you like collaborate together with like, you're just sitting around having fun, right? So like there are these biblical references that aren't really symbolic in any way. I like shoehorns some symbolism in by making the Eden area very, like, green and prosperous and, like, being a little extra blessed. And there's, like, a tree that started to sprout when they sealed the gods away, and something tree of knowledge. I don't know. It's all a very thin veneer of, like, reference without actually meaning much. Like, the closest thing is... The closest thing to meaning in any of that is that Adam was the first human, and he was created by another mortal, not a god, and the gods were pissed about it, and, you know, like, building contrast from there. And that, like, Eden is a place that was built by humans and stood in opposition to any divinity, and yeah. Like I said, it's pretty thin. Anyway, so this first session, Envoy from Lunderkirk is coming to negotiate, and like 2 of the characters are basically escorting him. And what I should have done is just start off the session with a fight or a challenge or drama of some sort, and instead I was like, oh, you're riding on a cart, you roll up to this city, like you wave to the guards, you show that you're one of the Bronze Darters, one of, like, the, you know, the kind of, like, scouting and adventuring guild that, like, frequently escorts people, so they know, like, it's on the up and up, they let you in. And then, like, the other 2 players are conveniently sitting there waiting to, like, tail this envoy to see what his deal is, see what he's up to, get a read on him, because one of the players is, like, a noble from the city, is the daughter of a councilman, and she wants to just kind of know what's up in the city. So it's like... it's the first time an envoy from one of the other cities is, like, coming to negotiate. And, yeah, like I said, she just wants to get a handle on the situation. See if this guy's a threat or a friend. They get spotted, which is not, you know... The dice say that they got spotted. And I was like, okay, yeah, they spot you. And the guys, like, you basically, the players called them, 2 of the players called the other players out, and are like, hey, you're being real suspicious, what's going on? And there's, like, a weird kind of, like, stilted back and forth there. And it ends up with the group not getting together. And they just keep failing to tail these guys for a while. They don't, like, you know... Group A just knows that Group B is following them. Group A is heading over to meet the 5th and final player, who is, like, another noble in the city, one that this envoy has met before, and this is, like, my way to tie everyone together. But there's a lot of, like, slow role-playing. They do all end up in the same tent, the same building, fairly quickly, so it's not like it was a complete failure, but it like, lacked drama, and it took, like, the whole session, and... we were playing kind of... it was like a 2.5-hour session, so that contributes to it for sure, but still. So they got together slowly. They didn't really have a good reason to be together, which showed up in a couple of ways in a couple of places, and they had to kind of come up with awkward reasons why they were going to seek each other out and going to work together, and... like, 5 players is a lot to wrangle, like, to account for all of their motivations and all of their backstories, and to give them a reason to be together at the start. And next time I will probably just offload that to the players. Just be like, all right, I'm going to give you the starting premise, the starting situation. I will give you the first 5 minutes ahead of time. You tell me why you're there. And yeah, with a larger group, I think that's just what I'm going to have to just... I think that's an easier way to do it. I've never had, like, played with a group of 5 players that didn't have tied up, like, interconnected backstories, so that was a challenge. And, like, spiraling from there, there've been a lot of, like, little bumps where, like, what he's coming to negotiate is, like, something about there are, like, some lands up. There's some lands up near this other city that are contested.
Enterprise pick you up today? Well, say you want to take a weekend road trip with friends. Enterprise has you covered. Or...
so, there are these lands that are contested up by Lunderkirk. Eden is holding them because Eden had, like, all of the power on this continent for a long time. And I could have sent them off that way. Could have said, hey, you have to go deal with some problems, relieve some tensions up there. Like, get them into the politics of it. Get them in on that side. And, like, maybe have them build up goodwill in this other area. Come up with, like, I don't know. Yeah, just some kind of plot thread that direction, which would have resulted in more traveling and more stuff to do. And instead, I was like, nah, we're gonna do something that can be done in one session, and it'll have some combat, and it'll be straightforward, get the group together, it'll be fun and fine. It did not take just one session. The entire first session was all about, like, walking through the city, getting to know this guy, getting him to the council, and there was no challenges, there's no drama, because I didn't expect them to, like, role play with each other and this character as much, which, again, is fine. Like, that's good. All of that is good that they were doing all of that. But, like, I didn't account for it. I didn't think they would. So I didn't have any challenges in the city. I was like, no, he's gonna have this thing with his mine. He wants, like, steel, high-quality steel from Eden, because they have these mountains with, like, great ore, basically. So I made the Star Wars mistake of making the opening scene about, like, trade rights. So that was good. That was good. Yeah, first session was all about the city. Then they finally left to go check out this mine, to inspect the mine, to see what the state it was in, to see what the road to the mine looked like, and to, you know, figure all of this out. And the second session was, like, again, a ton more roleplay in the start, and then traveling to this mine, and they had to stop before getting to the mine, because, again, we were still playing the short sessions. We had 3 hours to play, and there's always, like, half an hour BS at the start, so, like, time got filled really fast. Really, really fast. And whoops. Yeah, it's just I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to be 2 sessions in and still not be at the first quest. The third session, like, the second session, there's, like, honestly not that much to talk about the session. It's like they left the city. There was roleplay with the envoy at the start. Okay, let me step back. I, like, impromptu added this fight with assassins at the end of the first session. These, like, sand assassins. These, like, constructs of sand that jumped down and tried to kill the envoy, supposedly. And that will come back later. I will reuse that. That was, like... It's like, I know there's some elemental stuff with, like, elemental gods and constructs and things going on in this campaign, so let me just throw these in, and I'll figure out why they're here later. And I think I've done that. I've done a good job of that. And I was like, here's a combat. Here, roll some dice in this first session. So it's not, like, just completely, like... trade rights and walking around and, you know. So there's that. Second session is much the same, where they, like, walk around the town, like, have some conversations, leave town, they start traveling, they run into an encounter. The encounter takes a long time, because this is the second time players have ever rolled dice in this game. Like, again, brand new game. Some people completely new to role-playing in general. And, yeah, it just took a while. Just took a while to finish the combat. So by the time the combat was done, the session had to end. The combat was with these rat folk? No, not rat folk. Not rat folk. Were-rats. Combat was with these were-rats who did, like, just really chunky damage. I have had the curse of rolling max damage so much this campaign. And so, like, a couple of players went down really fast. Really, really fast. But ultimately, no one's, like, I don't know. The combat ended pretty smoothly. And yeah, it was ultimately not that narratively interesting. A couple of people did get bit, so, you know, we're rats. The next session, they finally got to the mine. They split up in this hex to, like, look for the mine. one group found the mine, one group found a burnt down village that I like put there for intrigue, and I've been rusty. I haven't ran a game in like a few years. So that's like showing for some of this. They ran into this burnt down farm where there was like a body inside, there was a grave, there was like a bugbear like bolted to a tree with a crossbow bolt, and some of the scene was supposed to look like one of the characters' like backstories, where like his village was attacked, it was burnt down, and like a couple of people were, his parents in particular, were like hanged. And I just made it to look like that to add intrigue, and it was like signaling to him that it was related to his backstory, because obviously, but I don't know. I shouldn't have done it because it's not really related to his backstory in the way he would think. Yeah, that was like a mistake. I should have done something else. I should have made it like, I wanted to show A, that there were bugbears that they were going to run into, B, that there was someone else around dealing with the bugbears, which happens to be the it's like a foil of the bronze darters called the Brass Scales. They're a mercenary company run by this guy named Brass, which shows up in some of this world building stuff. Some of my players, like, that is a character that one of my players made. I think my brother, actually. So, like, that mercenary company is in this area dealing with bugbears and other threats. And that's all I wanted to show there. And I wanted to make it slightly emotionally impactful for one of the characters, so I made it look like his village being burned down. But that was a mistake. That was too much signaling, you know? So that was silly. But, yeah, they like, get to the mine. They run into, again, more people from the Brass Scales who are there. They're gathering ore, again, like, for themselves, to, like, make weapons to outfit their mercenary company. And so, like, the party starts to kind of infiltrate this group. One of them, gets like a 20 on a deception check to, like, say that they're new recruits or, like, someone hired by the Brass Scales, something like that. And that's enough to, like, fool this dwarf and this gnome that are in there looking over watching over the mercenary company's mining operation. And then they are attacked by bugbears, looking for some revenge for, like, their scuffle with the Brass Scales. So they are, like, they don't care who these other people are. They're, like, hyper-focused on the dwarf and the gnome who are in the back. They, like, power through one of the players, jump over him, attack the dwarf. The gnome, like, flanks around, doesn't really do much important. They're, like, out for blood because this dwarf this crossbow-wielding dwarf is the one that pinned their friend to a tree. And that's basically the extent of that. And I thought, like, maybe there would be a conflict between the Brass Scales and the player group as they're trying to, like, get, trying to get their way into the mine. That didn't end up happening. They roleplayed through it really well, which this group is doing a lot. So, they've roleplayed through 2 different potential conflicts, one of which I'll talk about shortly. And then, yeah, this bugbear, like, if they did end up in a fight, these bugbears would have showed up. They showed up really quickly. They would have showed up during the fight and complicated things, instead of being a conflict between the players and the Brass Scales. They just kind of teamed up against the bugbears. The bugbears still managed to kill one of the dwarves, and I was very tempted to, like, let the players revive him, but, like, the goblin dog crit the dwarf, and my temptation to be nice to my players, I knew I had to, like, fight it. I was like, no, there's got to be, like, drama here. I've had, like, none in my campaign so far. Like, I have to let this, like, connection that they could have made, I have to let him die. And, like, I think that was, like, the one good thing I did that session. It resulted in some pretty real moments for the player characters. One like, who's kind of new to this life of, like, fighting and mercenary work, and they're, like, formerly a noble who's been not, like, pampered, but well, yeah, actually, yes. Just yes. So, yeah. That character, Eve, she had a moment where she just, like, stared in kind of shock and contemplation about, like, this, this, not innocent, but, like, friendly to neutral character, like, dying right in front of her and, like, not being able to save him. Yeah. And then the leftover gnome, the leftover person from the brass scales, seeing that, like, her friend and comrade is dead, she's, like, stricken with grief. She's convinced that these players are, like, part of the mercenary company, so, like, she basically leaves it in their hands and, like, takes the miners and leaves because the players convince her that it's dangerous to keep these, like, peasant miners, basically, in this cave. Obviously, like, more bugbears could show up at any moment, that kind of thing. So they resolved that way pretty well. They returned with the necessary information, a sample from the mine. It's all, like, a very simple quest, and I knew that this was, like, too straightforward, not enough drama. Just, you know. Figured, like, I felt that I wasn't moving things along the right way, right? And one of my players kind of, like, confirmed that. We had another session. They got back to town, and it was just a roleplay session in town. That's, like, all it was. Actually, like, they met kind of an NPC called the Judge on the way back, who was kind of fun to play. He is not consequential. He was just a random table character that came up. I have, like I said, I love scripting. I'm addicted. All of these buttons are scripts. I have, like a known NPC thing, and like a generate NPC button, I think. Yeah. So this just rolls, like, their goal, their fear, like, what their class is, what their alignment is. Yeah, I have a bunch of that. So, like, I also have a known character one, and he was rolled off the known characters of just, like, pre-generated NPCs that I had. And he's just a mercenary from Eden. Just, I don't know, just a small, short encounter to slightly simulate the living world, and, like, he'll probably show up again. His whole thing is, like, basically, his name, I think his real literal name is Judge, even though he goes by the Judge, and I think his whole thing is, like, punishing evildoers, basically, and he does other mercenary work on the side just to protect people. But if the player characters happen to run afoul of the ruling party of the city, which could totally happen, then this character might end up coming after them under the false or true assumption that they are, like, ne'er-do-wells. So they get back to the session. They have a fairly tame... They get back to the session? They get back to Eden, the city. They have a fairly tame encounter. A fairly tame day, like, reporting back, talking to townsfolk, going to a bar and trying to finagle their way into, like, free beer, which I took that opportunity and said, here, you want free beer, what you're actually going to get is free beer and a connection with this merchant who finds you amusing. And he runs, like, trade routes from the middle of the continent to the northeast, and, like, he'll probably come back, just, you know, introduce NPCs that you can reuse, or reuse NPCs that already exist wherever you can. And then, like, anytime you bring an NPC back, players are like, oh, cool, it's this guy. We know what he's about, you know, like, like, even if it's not realistic to run into this same person later, they absolutely still will. Just because, like, narrative kind of trumps realism in a lot of sense. Like, that's what makes a satisfying game, not, like, running into a new NPC on the west side of the map, because what are the chances of running into the same merchant from before? Like, just not... Running into a new NPC there is not necessarily as interesting. So it was at that point, that, like, really boring session where, honestly, I was stalling for time, because one player was, like, super late. they had some stuff going on for like almost an hour, more than an hour, and they had important stuff they had to do in the city, and instead of being like, hey, let's do this outside the game or whatever your interaction with this person, we'll do it, you know, I'll just delay forever, and then we can have the conversation in game, basically. And then we still ended up having it through text because they were like, I don't want to pause what's going on for this. Let's just do it in text on the side, which it's always super easy for players, and like I think they expect that I can just like turn and like type to them while I'm like speaking out loud different words to players and like mentally processing, but like it's really hard. I'm trying to get better at it, but that's really hard, doing like the side stuff. I can do it if the players are bickering amongst themselves. I can't do it when I'm like running stuff. But yeah, it was about that point. I was like, some of the players have to be bored. I am bored. I know some of the players are really enjoying themselves because they're NPC or they're role-playing things like getting free beer at the bar, which is just, you know, this is one of the things like new players will do. So I was trying to find ways to speed things along, amp up the drama while not discouraging those like cool learning how to roleplay moments. You know, I was afraid my new player wouldn't be speaking up at all, and instead he's speaking up too much, which is like a wonderful problem to have. I'd rather solve it by just they get used to playing the game and get used to sharing the spotlight. So, yeah, I kind of thought on this and like the way the sessions were going kind of slowly, and I just did a lot of work building out the world and what's going on and like the threads, and this will be getting into, let me just give me just a minute. I need to add a text thing. This is going to get into like temporary spoiler territory since it's dealing with like the next, we'll wait on that. We'll wait on that. So I did some work to solve these problems, and we'll talk about that shortly. The next session was like they picked up some jobs. I got some complaints that not complaints, but some of the players were like, I don't know why we're like doing these random jobs. I don't really know what my motivation is right now. What's my motivation thing? It's like, oh, your motivation is like, I can't really decide that for players. It's not necessarily your job as a DM to give players their motivation and like hook them in. Like, I threw hooks out there, they took the hooks. It's not up to me to decide why or like what draws them to those hooks. So, but they took 2 missions that I'd like kind of prepped to start amping up the drama and making real adventures, and not these like, you know, we spent 4 sessions on a mine job that I thought would be done in 1 session. So I knew I had to come up with some better stuff. I needed to streamline things and create action. So I set up some adventures.
Visible is a $40 a month phone service that gives it to you straight.
I set up
Unlimited
some
data on
adventures
Verizon's 4G LTE network.
and put them in places where the players would see, and they picked 2 of them. One, which is they went to escort a noble to kind of a farm town that their family owns. Not this noble specifically, but someone in his family. They're going to like check on it. His sister went on ahead like a month and a half ago, was writing letters about kind of the worsening state of the town, and then her letters just stopped coming. So he decided that all right, I haven't heard in 2 weeks, and like sometimes the mail is slow, sometimes couriers just, it takes a while to get back and forth, but he's like, no, I need to go. It's been long enough. I need to go like check on my sister and see what's up in this town. And so he put out a notice looking for like a Bronze Darter escort to his town. And this is a hook into, it's like spoilers, I guess. If players happen to watch this later, mute for like, I don't know, 10 seconds. This is leading off to the adventure against the cult of the reptile god, which is like a 2E adventure, like really old, maybe a 1E. I don't know these things, but Yeah, so it's like a pre-made adventure that, this is the nice thing about kind of sandboxy campaigns, is that you can just plop adventures in, and that's totally what I did. I plopped it in. And I will speak no more of it right now, but that's going really well. Like, the players are really enjoying that adventure, even one who's like, one player took a break and was like, I'm not really enjoying myself, I don't know why. Might be WoW Classic, but it might not be. And I was like, okay, y'all, I just figured out some stuff to make the game more exciting. I figured out where the story is going, so like, if you stick with me 2 more sessions and you don't like it, you can peace out. You don't even have to stick with me for that, but I think the next few will be more enjoyable. Yeah, so they like started to travel to this town. I was like, we're gonna really hit the players, you know, we're gonna run a really cool encounter to make up for the fact that like a couple of the other ones have been a little boring and a little not interesting. So I made this whole like Ice Wolf thing. She was going to have like a lot of special abilities, related. This is all related again to like kind of the weird stuff happening with like gods being elevated, this creature, like elemental creatures gaining power, kind of like a hierarchy of supernatural beings forming. And instead of fighting this ice wolf, my brother cast the charm spell, and the wolf failed his save. So they charmed the wolf. And this wasn't an immediate... It's not like, alright, they cast one spell, now they're done with the encounter. Like, now it's over. It's like, okay, it's charmed. What now? And they start walking, and the wolf is just following them. It's like, great. And this is after stalking them for like a whole day, by the way. I missed that data point. So this wolf starts like stalking them. They charm it. They think it's done. They start walking away. The wolf follows them because it's friendly to this player. Now before it wanted to eat this player, now it just wants to go where that player goes. So like, you've changed the problem. You still have this problem. There's still like 2 other wolves following this guy, and there would have been more like ice construct wolves that would have popped up. I'm not going to go too much into the wolf's abilities because, spoilers, I'm probably going to reskin him. Use him later. Because, like, 1, it was a lot of work. 2, it's a cool encounter. 3, I put in hooks to, like, the guy rolled Bardic Lore on this wolf, and he rolled, like, okay, but not, it was, like, over a 10. So I was like, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you just the bullshit stories that you've heard about a creature like this, which is, like, a ice god wolf, like, much more powerful, about how it can, like, dive into snow and, like, swim through it as though it were a fish, which led to a lot of dumb jokes. And, like, control over ice. It has a breath, a freezing breath that can, like, chill your very blood and that kind of thing, and, doesn't have any of those. Didn't have any of those. But the next one might. So, yeah. So the way they solved it, nothing too hard. They tied the wolf to a tree. The wolf rolled poorly, breaking out of the rope. The wolf encounter was done. So that was handled. Then they continued on their way. They heard a couple rumors about the town they were going to, just to give them some of the baseline information about the adventure. Just from, like, travelers on the road. Then they arrived in town. And despite the fact that was, like, not exactly an exciting session, I feel like everyone had more fun in it. I feel like I ran it better. I felt like I was more on top of my game. I felt like I knew what was going on, and I wasn't floundering or panicking for information. Like, just basically getting back into the swing of it after not having run a game in 2 years, or whatever it's been. And, like, I've only run a handful of games to begin with. Like, the amount of time I haven't been playing D&D is still much larger than the amount of time I have in terms of running the game, like, over the last 10 years. And then this gets into the very last session, which, again, went pretty well, I would say. There's a cool cult encounter, with some of the folks in the village. There's, like, they came to this inn. There's a bunch of weird stuff going, like, the minstrel stopped playing. I described it as as though Obi-Wan cut the arm off. These are all nerds. Obi-Wan cut the arm off of a good doctor's friend. Just a super on-the-nose reference to A New Hope. And then one of the players playing a noble, Solus, they like threw some money at the minstrel and said, why'd you stop playing? Keep playing. And so he did. And this kind of assuaged the tension a little bit. Everyone kind of sat back down, went back to their drinks. One player bought drinks for everyone at the bar, and some of them like raised their mugs. A lot of them didn't respond at all. And looking at their mugs later, one of the players noticed that like some of them just didn't they didn't really drink anything from it. So just like signaling that some of the townsfolk in this bar are a little like not, they're like acting friendly enough, really, aside from the cold entrance. But there's something off. They're acting a little bit strange. The only people who weren't was this table here, who the group at that table, they were like being pretty mouthy with the players, like snapping at them, telling them to leave, outsiders weren't welcome, that kind of thing. And the bartender came over and he was like, just settle down, they're good customers. It's like, I need to keep these people happy. It's my job to keep these people happy. And he's like stressing the point a lot. And it might have been signaling too strong, but this is cultist stuff, you know? It's fine. I don't mind. This is a place that was supposed to be suspicious from the outset, so yeah. And like the idea with this whole town is just that people have been going missing, they've been coming back, they've been acting strangely since they've been coming back, and aside from that, a bunch of people have been randomly moving away as well because they're just not happy with the direction the town is going, which is totally fair when people are disappearing. Then another player sat down at like the long table with some people, and they were like, I signaled a little bit that they were off by saying they all were wearing kind of the same wooden smile, and they were acting very friendly and asking you questions about where you're coming from, what you're doing in town, when you're leaving, and just trying to get information out of you. And like they would answer questions that the players had, but there was one question in particular, I wish I could remember it, but he says that, you know, the player asks this question, something about the cult, something about what's going on, or like how they feel about the town, and the guy just responds with a different, like they ask a question of their own. I think that's when he was like, so when are you leaving? What's your business in town? And the player just went on answering without like pressing his question. So they, you know, roleplayed in here for a long time. Everyone except the player who was like, I'm not really having a fun time. He was like, I'm gonna sit in the corner and brood. And I was like, well, okay. I don't think that will help you have a better time, but I understand that you're not engaged. He had missed the last session, and I knew that he had been missing information, so he didn't really know what was going on. So he's like, I'm just gonna go to bed early, because I'm not really even happy that we're taking this job. Our job was to get the guy here. We did that. Why are we still sticking around? And then he went off to bed, being a grump. Everyone kind of role-played around for a while. Not him, because he'd like opted out. So that took a long time to roleplay through the bar, and then they all went to bed. You will notice that there are like red marks here, and people with skulls over them. The bartender tried to like... They opted for the big room with 4 beds and one of the individual rooms. And the bartender, at the very end of the night, was like, hey, how about I'll give you the keys to these other rooms. I want you to be comfortable. We don't really have any people staying here, so just spread yourselves out. Be comfortable. And the character he was talking to was like, sure, yeah, give me the keys. I'll let my party know. And he went in. Everyone was asleep, except one, a goblin named Ludwig, who's been a wonderful character to play with. I'm so happy with that character. Happy with all my characters. He's been like a joy in terms of role-playing and like, yeah, just great. Really fun. Everyone was happy in that big room. And so the noble character who grabbed the keys was like, all right, well, I'll take an extra bed, and ended up over here. And the whole idea was to spread them out between the different rooms so that you'll notice, if I go to dynamic lighting, there were secret panels in this door and in the back wall that were like just hidden panels that like let people in and out who know about it. And so he was trying to spread them out so that they could like come in here and like drug people individually and then drag them off somewhere to like. They theorized that it was to be fed to some ghouls that they found in the basement, which is like maybe accurate. Maybe some of them would have met that fate. But the bigger thing is to get more members for the cults. So they attempted that. They went in here. The main cultist whispered the words necessary to cast the spell Silence, which would block all sound coming from one of her companions. Would block all sound in like a radius of like I think it's like 10 or 15 feet. I don't remember. And it's a spell that's like higher level than this cleric should be able to cast, but it's like basically their signature spell from this this entity that they now serve. So they cast that spell. The player sleeping here, Eve, rolls a 27 on their perception check to see if they hear the whisper and wake up. They rolled a natural 20 and a 27, which... So, they woke up. They, like, sit up. The main cultist, like, opens the door, steps in, and they just stare at each other for a moment. And then the player, like, draws their sword, and the cultist, like, moves forward. They all move in with, like, these billy clubs to try to, like, basically knock this player unconscious. As, like, no sound comes out. And there's, like, a lot of role-playing around, like, the character trying to scream and nothing coming out, and it was great. It was it was wonderful. Very fun. This player here, who I inadvertently moved closer to the, like, target player, just completely on accident, also rolled really well. Not well enough to hear the whispers, but well enough to, like, feel the vibrations of people, like, stomping around in the next room. It's only one room. It's, like, a wood-floored inn. Like, there's not a ton of support down here, as you can see. So, like, shaky floors. So he wakes up. He rolled, like, a 26, just, like, right underneath. So he wakes up. He goes in. He, like, knocks on the door and, like, says Eve's name. And I'm like, you don't hear the knock on the door and you don't hear your words. And he's like, oh, shit. And so he, like, kicks the door down successfully. He with just a really good athletics check, sees what's going on, goes and wakes up the other players. So, like, all of the players show up. They stomp these 4 cultists. The main cultist runs away. And so the plan is completely foiled, and that whole plot point is just dead. I fell victim to very good rolls from the players, and to be fair, the cultists also rolled really well. There was a max damage, like, Billy Club hit, and then another max damage Billy Club crit. So just, like, almost all of the player's health in 2 hits, and then the player never got hit again, except for one at the very end for 2 damage. Like, the last-ditch hit. And then, yeah. So that cultist ran away, told one cultist, who turned out to be the bartender, to, like, stay and hold them off as that cultist departed. And he did so. He fell unconscious very quickly, but managed to hold them off kind of long enough. One character was running at 60 feet per round due to some kind of spell, I don't remember what, and, like, almost caught up to the cultist. I said this cultist ran to a window here, rolled out the window, and you lost sight of him. And then he, like, ran up to the window and looked out, and he's like, well, can I look for blood? They got hit. Can I look for blood anywhere? And I was like, that's pretty good. You can. You will need to spend an action seeking, because that's just what it is. That's what the rule is. If you're going to, like, stop and look for clues, I can tell you that you didn't see anything immediately upon exiting, so you, like, don't immediately know where they are. You will have to spend an action. And he's like, I'm just going to take a guess instead, because I only have one more action this turn. And he ran out the front. I described there were, like, bushes up this way, bushes this way, and then the road. And he ran out front. I told him, you see that the cellar is open. And he ran in the cellar, assuming that, like, they went in there to hide, and immediately found out that they weren't there. And he just kind of sulked back upstairs to report back to the group. They try to question Bertram, the innkeep, to see what's going on, and he's just giving more robotic responses than they've seen from anyone else. He's just like, "Oh, are you unhappy with your service? You seem very angry. What? Can I do something? Can I do something to make you more comfortable?" And they're like, "But you just tried to kill us. What are you? You tried to kidnap one of our..." He's like, "So you are unhappy then? I can give you a discount." And, you know, just like he's on like a program, like he's been programmed to like be the friendly innkeep. And they realize pretty quickly they're not going to get information out of him. They like... So there was a moment in Eve's room where the main cultist tried to like put a cloth over her mouth. And one of the characters is like, one moment, and goes, gets the cloth, puts it over Bertram's mouth, and he just passes out, just falls on the ground. And they're like, oh, okay. And so they tie him up, drag him downstairs, and then they like started, that's it for like most of the narrative stuff that session. They started investigating this underground cellar, which would have been a whole thing if someone got kidnapped, and now it's like basically optional, but they're like, it's intriguing, let's check it out. And yeah, they ran into some... What did they run into? There was a snake in one room, which they dispatched quickly. They were like, do you want me to roll initiative? And I'm like, no, just go ahead. It's like a flavor enemy, basically. Like, they noticed that it was hanging from the beam. A character tried to, like, they could have just killed it right there. It was basically for flavor. Character tried to roll under it instead. It fell on them, constricted them for like 8 damage. Would you believe that it rolled max damage? So it did a bunch of damage to him, accidentally turned into a damage tax instead of a flavor element. And yeah. They walked into here. They found some empty chests that had been holding some offerings for the cult, which they basically gathered as much. They're like, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of people walking through here. Notably, they discovered one of the players rolled a really good tracking check in this room, and they noticed the footprints of boots of the guy, boots that looked about the same foot size as Bertram the innkeep, walking through here along with a bunch of other boots along this way. They noticed some fresh tracks of a mud viper, which is like a giant snake going up this way, a giant snake that likes to hide in dirt. I wonder if that is relevant. He crit on the scouting check and the nature check to identify everything there. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. I guess he didn't crit on the nature check. He just rolled like a 24, which is up there. So I was like, yeah, you know that mud vipers went up here, and you know that they like to burrow into dirt. I wonder what might happen if you enter this room. He also found some footprints of lizard folk, much less recent. But they had been at some point freely moving around under here, and have not been for quite some time. And then they kind of came around the corner. They almost opened this door. These ghouls were hidden, like, in this corner, and this corner, and this corner. And I wanted one that they could see from the door, if they looked around enough. And they did, and they spotted it, and then it resulted in this, like, kind of really weird thing where they were trying to take pot shots on these guys. And then one was like, okay, I'm gonna pretend to feed these guys. I should... If we weren't already like 30 minutes over at this point, I would have said no. They're obviously hostile to you. They know you're hostile. You just killed one of them. You like Nova'd one of them through the door. They're not gonna like fall for your bullshit. But I was like, we're super over. I need to come up with a better. Anyway, so normally they would have been still hostile to the players. They would have been sly to their tomfoolery of trying to convince them that they were like, one of the players was now trying to feed them after murdering one of their ghoul buddies. Because ghouls are not super dumb. They have like a 12 intelligence. So, at least in Pathfinder. So, yeah, normally they wouldn't fall for like such tricks after you had just loosed arrows at them. But they were like, yeah, this player moves up. He starts like jingling the keys, unlocking the door. They run up thinking that they're getting fed, basically. And instead, one of them gets Nova'd. And then they're like, all right, now let's open the door for real. They do so. One of them runs up and scratches the players. I probably should have had it try to like bite them to inflict a disease or something. But again, like right at the end of the session, I was like, meh, it's fine. So they deal with all of the ghouls. And it's notable that the player who had been not having a super great time the last couple sessions was like really engaged with like this dungeon crawling part and like finding these ghouls and the idea that ghouls could just ruin an entire village if they got loose. Like they could turn other people into ghouls. He was like, no, it is like my job to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen. So let's make sure we deal with these, even though some of us are damaged and we're low on resources. If they're not really damaged, some of them took temporary damage, but really they're mostly full health. So they cleaned him up at this player's behest. And after the session, he was like, you know, the story was a lot better there. I'm not sure if I'm feeling it, but like this session, I was definitely more engaged with what was going on after the hour-and-a-half long bar session. Everything else was really cool. So I appreciated that note. I still don't know if he'll continue to play, but we'll see. So next session, I'll probably do a prep stream sometime over the weekend that might be a little more interesting and a little less, like, talky than this, about just setting up. There's, like, 2 more dungeons that they can go through. There's, like, a main dungeon and, like, kind of an optional one, like this. So I'll just set up the last couple of rooms of this to have some, like, higher narrative engagement encounters. And then I will make sure those other dungeons are clean, and that's basically all I have left for the adventure. And I guess I can talk briefly about, like, kind of super... I will talk first about plot spoilers for the rest of the adventure. So, like, stuff that will be relevant before the players get back to the main city. So players, if any of you are watching this in the future, make sure you don't watch past this point until you're back to Eden. So where do you just put... Oh, there's text. Okay. Let's see. Session spoilers. Oh, Kaomi. Kaomi, thank you for the sub. Thank you for being the first sub. That's awesome. Congratulations on being the first sub is what I should say. Yeah. I forgot to unpause the music. Thank you very much. So let's see. Session spoilers text. Brown. Let's call it like arc spoilers. Wait until I'll leave it like that. I'll tell them what's going on. Oh my god, holy shit. Hey, Ethan, thank you for the also sub. Dang. Thank you very much. Thank you for being number 2. How do I I don't know how to change the color. I used to know how to do this. White text won't do it. Let me tell you, white text won't do it when all of this is like white. Why am I bad at this now? Oh, I just scrolled down. I'm so smart. Background color, black. Foreground color, white. Yeah. Background opacity. Oh, that's what background means. It's not an outline. That's okay. And we will color code this for my players. Arc spoilers will be orange, and forever spoilers later will be red. So here we go. There you go, players. Bow. This is like, I don't know, still out. It's not relevant to anyone else watching, but yeah, if my players happen to see. So, arc spoilers. The whole... I changed this adventure, this cult against the Cult of the Reptile God adventure a little bit, obviously. It's fitting in with the idea that, like, creatures are being elevated to be gods in place of the old gods that have now been banished. And so the normal bad guy at the end of this is a Naga called, like, Explicita Defilis, I think. They're like a actually famous Naga from D&D. I don't know if I'm going to keep the name yet. I should figure that out very soon. But I might rename it, or I might just keep the homage. Their whole jam is that they're putting together this cult to try to be raised to the level of godhood, and they're getting close. They're getting strong. They have, like, supernatural powers. Everyone in the town kind of worships the old god of life, Denala, and this god, or this Naga, has been reaching out to people and pretending to be the voice of Denala, and when obviously they are not, they're something completely different. They're like an evil entity trying to take advantage of this town and turn into like a demigod or something. So the players will find all of that out. There's also like one of the players said that they are going to be Adam's son, which is, by the way, where all humans come from in this world. They are all offspring of Adam. If that player is the one that hasn't been having a ton of fun, because like, I think it's partly, there's a lot of reasons why, but also their backstory hasn't been included very well. I've been slacking on that for all of the players, but him in particular, I haven't really known where to start. So they're going to run into... the assumption is that the noble they escorted here is his sister. The assumption is that she was, like, taken by the cult. And that's partially true. But also, she ran into another child, a much younger boy, who's, like, running away, super scared, says, like their farm was attacked, their house was burned down, their parents are dead, basically, like, and they had a dream that this would happen, so they ran away because they were convinced that this dream was real, which matches up much more closely than the other stupid farm I went over. Matches up much more closely to this character's backstory, so I'm gonna, like, this will be because he had a dream that all of that his, like, parents would be attacked before it happened. So, like, this boy is going to hook into that and hopefully attract his attention once they find the sister and the boy, and maybe they'll be taken over by the cults. I have some prep to do around that, but that's kind of the idea there. And the kind of the tricky thing about that, by the way, is that the player knows that his father is Adam, this, like, legendary figure in this world. But the character doesn't know that yet, and I want to bring those two knowledges together as quickly as possible so that the player knowledge and the character knowledge are just the same. They both know that Adam is their daddy, and that some people want them dead for it. Especially as the succession crisis in Eden ramps up. Like, there's going to be more and more signs that, like, someone is basically hunting down other potential successors, other people within Adam's bloodline. So that is kind of those are kind of the major things there. And then after that, the players are going to travel north, and they will find out that there are some pirates scouting the lands, and that's not really super interesting, but I will find ways to make it interesting. It just currently isn't. So there will be prep around that as well. Let me see. Session spoilers. We will now. That was actually really short. We will get into just kind of forever spoilers. So if players do end up watching this, just check with me before you continue, and I will let you know kind of when you can actually watch this. But I wanted to go over. There's something. Let's see. Maybe I don't want to. There's an idea in a game called, well, Dungeon World, and also powered by the Apocalypse games, really, called, there's this idea called fronts, which is a way to organize your campaign plot, basically, over the course of time, and just kind of a simple way to set up events going forward, which I found extremely helpful, because I kept thinking of these little things that could happen, like individual events on the way to disaster for a bunch of different stuff, a bunch of different threats, and it wasn't really leading up to anything. I wasn't sure how to hint at it. I didn't know where the bullet points should be on those threats. And then I started making fronts, and I was so, like, just inspired by making them, and it helped organize my thoughts in such a usable and direct way. And just, fronts. They're so good. They're so simple, too. Like, this is all they are. You have the lead threat, the head of the threat. This is like a slightly modified version, I think. But you have like the main bad guy, right? We'll start with Salamander because it's more straightforward. There is in the north, players have been hearing some rumors, some stuff about this Salamander, which is like a god, like a demigod that has been elevated in the absence of the gods. And yeah, just inspired by Salamander of like real world mythology and like the Legend of Mana, Secret of Mana series. And yeah, so it literally is just a lizard that is red and breathes fire and has power over fire. Now has power over fire. Before it was just it was a little Sparky boy, and now he is the Burninator. So you have the head of the threat, you have his goal, which is currently just burn everything Adam made. He knows he was created by Adam. This is part of what gives him his ability to naturally have demigod powers in the absence of gods. But he also apparently has some issues surrounding that. These fronts have a lieutenant. In this case, it is the Burning Man, which I think I'm just going to keep. It was thrown in there as a very obvious tongue-in-cheek, on-the-nose reference, but I kind of love it. So the Burning Man. The henchmen currently comprise of just flame cultists, people who worship the salamander, which primarily consists of the hobgoblins and goblins that were in the area because they just had made home in the desert. The salamander started like being a threat in the area, and they were like, let's be friends with the giant flamey lizard. And that is currently working out okay for them. And this gets into the grim portents. So like, as this front gets ignored, it will move forward, both literally and figuratively, towards the players to be more and more threatening. The first thing that they will hear of, other than this generic like, oh, there's cult activity and things going on, the very first thing is that this cult is going to just push right on up, like a couple miles away from Eden. If we go back to the map, the Overveld map. Oh, I should show you Orlane. It's whatever. Cult is currently up here. They're like hanging out in the desert, doing their thing in the hills and like solidifying territory there. They're going to push right down here, which is not like next door to Eden, but it's twice as close as they are now. The lieutenant, the Burning Man, is just going to make a huge push right up to the like a major fort down here, and that is just the first event. He'll be like right on the doorstep, so that gives them something pretty tangible to deal with, a tangible threat. It's very obvious where he's going from there. You know, they can only go forward. And from there, it's all about solidifying power. So the next thing that will happen is that they'll basically make a road, just like a supply route through there. They will establish power. This will allow the forces that have pushed forward to resupply, to kind of get reinforcements if they don't get pushed back. This kind of thing. It's like a little more it's a little more nebulous than the first one, a little more ideas than like actual problems, but I'll probably find a way to make that impactful. Like, it will prevent travel. There will be a bunch of people who can't travel north and trade anymore because of this like actual battlefront moving forward, and it'll probably cut off supply with the northeast side of the continent completely, which will make it easier for this front to move forward as well. So they make the supply route, and then the cult influence will spread outward from the supply route So villages along the way, now like humans and elves and anyone who lives along this route, they will start to also worship Salamander. Just by subjugation and like looking out for their own best interest, this will make Salamander stronger. This will reinforce the cult. Like, just, it will grow the forces. It won't be this group of like semi-monstrous races like that usually are kind of opposed to mortal races. It will be just actual, like, just everyone in the realm of influence of the Salamander will start to convert. And the next one will be that they will take over that, after like reinforcing and kind of not being able to be routed by Eden's forces, they will take over that fort that I mentioned at Green Rock Hill, and maybe around this time they will kind of establish an alliance with the Harpies and their, like, another kind of a elevated demigod, which will kind of be Garuda. I'm not sure if it will actually be Garuda, because this is starting to turn a little bit too much into Final Fantasy XIV, but something like that. Just one of the Harpies that will have, like, made good with the kobolds in the area, and will be kind of, like, worshipped as a savior and a protector, ironically, after basically trying to raid them, and then instead raiding the goblins that were attacking them. The gnolls... Did I say kobolds? I meant gnolls. The gnolls will start, like, worshipping this Harpy as a defender. And yeah, so they might end up working together after this point when the demigod there has, like, feels they have no choice in the matter anymore, like, to protect their people. Next, the cult just marches on Eden. The next threat, if it gets ignored, if they take over Green Rock Hill and the players do nothing, if status quo continues, the cult marches on Eden, they attack, they try to burn down the city. And then Salamander's goal will be recognized, and, like, Adam's established the center of power that Adam had before he died, which is something I should... Adam died, that's why there's a succession crisis. I should have made bullet points to note all of this, but that's fine. Yeah, so that'll be, like, kind of the big event at the end if this gets ignored all the way down that far. I kind of don't expect it to, but I kind of want it to, man. Like, writing this down, I want everything to go terribly. I can't wait for everything to go horribly wrong. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. The other one is, like, slightly less exciting to talk about, but it will result in stuff that the players are interested in. It's just, like, 2 of the cities were on islands. They were island nations. They had a lot of sea trade. They want to reestablish that trade. They want to own all sea trade to and from and around this continent. The head of this front is Grand Admiral Lane. Not exactly the ruler of one of the cities, but, like, just the head of the navy. Their lieutenant will be Privateer Chax. There is basically a proper navy, and then there's a bunch of pirates, and Privateer Chax is in with the pirates. And the henchmen of these are the Royal Corsairs and the Privateer Fleet, Privateer Fleet is, again, the pirates. And this is all just because my players were like, I want pirates to try to take over the port of, Eden's port of Castell. It's like, yeah, okay, I can make that happen. They want to have a pirate encounter. Some of them think I'm going to bring back an old character for it. Captain Falcone, who was literally just Captain Falcon. He had a large-sized locked spiked gauntlet that he used for his signature attack of Falcone Punch. Sorry. Keep it legally distinct. And yeah, that was his whole jam. He was in from one of my other campaigns. He will not be an enemy in this campaign. And yeah, the whole jam here is just, they block the city, they establish trade with one of the other cities, and kind of, like, more ships reinforce the blockade, so it will be harder to rout. They will start to siege Castell after their demands are not met. They will establish trade with another of the great centers of power on the continent, and occupy Castell, and push out the Green Stags, who are just, like, the guards of the city of Eden and just any territory they control. And then 5 is Castell. The ruler of Castell just submits. They say, fine, we are now part of these island nations and no longer serve Eden. And yeah, at that point, the impending doom is just that the island nations have complete control of trade on the continent. I don't know what that will look like to players. I don't know what that'll look like to players yet. It'll, like, the threat in this case will be less to the players and more to Eden, just in, like, they don't have power, they run out of money faster, they don't have as much of a monopoly on the supplies they need, that kind of thing. And that'll, I'm sure, I'll find a way to manifest that in the game if we actually get to that point. Yeah. So, I think that is about it for the Forever spoilers. I will, of course, kind of spread out. I will make the make a couple of more fronts sometime when I do another like prep session. I don't know what they'll be yet. I kind of want one of them to be themed on the old gods, but I don't know if that'll be now or later. The players in another microscope session introduced more kind of godly creatures that have popped up, and I don't think that I want to just copy like the cult of Salamander over to like the cult of the Ice Witch, and now we have Salamander and Shiva. I want to do something different with them.
At Shane Company, everything we do is built around help.
What I think one of them is going to be is brass. Yeah, I don't know if, in the interest of letting my players see this sooner than later, I don't think I want to fully fill out what that means yet. But I'm excited to work on that. I'm excited for that to pop out and for them to see what his whole deal is going to be. Old gods might be a little more direct, just in terms of the kind of religious following for the gods, like manifesting in certain ways and popping up threats. That might be an easier thing to slip in. Yeah, and I think that's basically it in terms of recapping and figuring out where we are currently at. I will close the fronts and turn off the spoiler warning. And I think I'm gonna like take a break and then just oops. Not that. That's not what I meant to turn off. Okay, I'm going to take a brief break, get a drink, take some drinks. I feel my throat starting to get stressed. Sorry, that was and we'll go on to some Legends of Runeterra to see what that game's all about because I'm excited.